Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I'd like to thank the Sloans for opening their home/sukkah to us, but this is not a sukkah event. We don't want any questions about Taisif. We discussed it with the Rav. It's not a problem, but thank you very much for having us here. And I think it's a beautiful thing to have an event about kashrus awareness. My family is a kashrus family. My father, he's started the Chaf K, and my brothers now are running the Chaf K, and my entire family is involved, my sister, my mother, everyone. I'm the only one that somehow got lost along the way and ended up staying here in Eretz Yisrael. But when my father would come, I would often go with him. My father spoke a perfect Yiddish, but didn't speak Hebrew. So I would be his interpreter, and also his time that we would be able to spend some time together. We went to all different places, all the Rabbanim we went. I used to go visit Rabbanim in the Eid HaCharedis, the Rabbanim from Petach Tikva, the Rabbanim from Rav Kook and Rabbi Rubin and the Rabbanot and everyone. We'd go all over, we'd go to all the factories together and all the different places of kashrus. So I got a lot of exposure to kashrus in Eretz Yisrael in particular, more than in America, through being there with my father. And one of the first thing I want to tell you, which I think is probably the most important thing that I have to say tonight, is that people that are extremely knowledgeable about kashrus in America do not necessarily know about kashrus in Eretz Yisrael. There's two reasons for that. But my father, who was, his whole life was kashrus, and he knew a tremendous amount about kashrus in America. But when he came to Eretz Yisrael, he was always asking different rabbanim, like, what's with this hechsher, what's with that hechsher, what's with this rab, and it was confusing. And the two of them, you would think that if you know kashrus, but it doesn't work that way. Kashrus in Eretz Yisrael is different. And one of the reasons it's different is because of the way that kashrus organizations work. There's something called ACO, which is the Association of Kashrus Organizations in America. It's run by Rabbi Shalom Fishbane. And that is all the kashrus organizations get together under one roof, and they talk to each other. There's tremendous communication between the kashrus organizations. My father just passed away around a year and a half ago. Rabbi Levy's just passed away, and they made a Achnasa Sefer Torah in honor of the two of them. My brother spoke about Rabbi Levy, and Rabbi Levy's son-in-law spoke about my father, and Rabbi Ganak is the person that was holding the Sefer Torah, and OU, OK, Chav K, everyone's there together. They're all working, and they understand each other because there's communication. For whatever reason, in Eretz Yisrael, it's different. It's just there isn't the same communication. So to know what's happening is much more challenging. And even these big organizations that know very well what's happening in America don't know really what's happening in Eretz Yisrael. And if you'd approach some of the people that run some of the organizations, they'll tell you, we don't know ourselves. They might ask people, but even that way, if you're not involved and you are really living the kashrus here, it's very hard to know what's happening. So to get a real picture of what's happening here, you need to have a Rav that lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he's involved in kashrus in Eretz Yisrael. And the person that I think is probably the one that people are speaking to the most about it, who's involved in kashrus, is Rabbi Shmuel Weiner. And I remember when Shmuel Weiner got involved in kashrus, there was an issue in a restaurant, and we just came up because we have sushi here. And what we did was we went to a supermarket. We got the seaweed, which had what we'll call a flimsy hechsher. I showed it to the Bachrim about how you could see the bugs in the seaweed. If you hold it up to the light, this seaweed, which was being served in this restaurant, didn't have a supervision that was really checking for bugs, and it's a barrier. It's just pressed up against you could see the entire bug on the. And I gave out to the Bachram and I showed them the seaweed. I'm like, can you find the bugs? And that's when there was a tremendous request, and people were calling Rabbi Weiner to get involved in kashrus, and that's something that he's spent a tremendous amount of time, and it's all just out of the goodness of his heart. It's a volunteer. And the reason why we're here is not because I don't work in kashrus. Rabbi Weiner, even though he's involved in kashrus, but it is something that he's doing just to be able to provide a service. And that the people that are coming from America should have an awareness of what's happening in kashrus. It's something that it can snowball. It can start here with the people that are present, and then if we share that with others, so then hopefully there'll be more of an awareness of what is the right thing to do, or what are the right things. It's disappointing when you have people that their standard of kashrus in America is higher than their standard of kashrus here. I can tell you, for example, we met together, Rabbi Weiner and myself, with Rabbi Elephant from the OU, and he said that the reason why we have a hard time giving hechsherim here is because people don't want our standard. It's too high. And there's a misconception that people might think that you're in Eretz Yisrael, I'm sure the standards are way higher than America. You shouldn't be sure of that, because it's not necessarily the case at all. And we're familiar with the big hechsherim in America, and their standards are very solid and very good. And a lot of us are not familiar with what's happening here. And to be an informed consumer is really very powerful. So I'd like to introduce Rabbi Weiner, a very dear friend, the Rosh Kollel, and the Rabbi of ZNT Kosher, ZNT the Shul, and also ZNT Kosher, to address the item. Yeah. My pleasure. Here you go, this is for you.
Okay, thank you again for the opportunity. Salom family, Rosh Shiva. I have to give a special thanks to Moshe Farkash for always helping us out, keeping us going, and doing a tremendous work. Like the Rosh Shiva said, I'm here just to create awareness. I am not from a kashrus family. I am not from a kashrus person, but I got thrown into it. So I guess I'm here. Okay, so just to create some kind of awareness for those that are visiting here in Eretz Yisrael. So I found that there's 3 misconceptions. One is that everything's politics. Now I'm not denying the fact that there is a lot of politics, but that's not the answer. The answer is not the politics, and as we'll explain. Number 2, second misconception is that for dairy, we could go to dairy restaurants. It doesn't need as much supervision as a fleischig restaurant, which I think that's also a misconception, which we'll try to explain a little more soon. And the third misconception is that and this the Rosh Shiva spoke about a little, that the weakest hechsher in Eretz Yisrael is better than the best hechsher in America. And as we know from being part of the ACO Association, we know that there are very good hechsherim in America, there are medium hechsherim, there are weak hechsherim. And so too over here also there are very good hechsherim, there are those that are second level, and there are those that are weak. But it goes both ways. So to say that the weakest hechsher here is better than the best hechsher there, I think you're insulting America and you're not aware of what's going on here. Just as an introduction to before we speak about what's so difficult about navigating kashrus here in Eretz Yisrael, let's understand what exactly is the kashrus organization doing. We're relying on an organization to do what? What are they doing for us? Why can't I go into a store, take a product off the shelf, look at the ingredients, and decide, sounds kosher, it's kosher, not kosher, not kosher. And the answer is because probably half the ingredients, all the ingredients, you don't even know what they are. And some of these ingredients are made up of 30 other ingredients to make up this with different types of chemicals and enzymes or emulsifiers and all different fancy words. So you don't even know what the ingredients are, number one. Number 2, when we talk about a factory, so the kashrus organization comes to the factory and they're coming to be machshir a product that's going to be produced in this factory. Now, sometimes the factory could be a non-kosher factory. They're taking over the factory for whatever time that is in order to produce this kosher run. Or sometimes at the same time, there could be part of the factory is going to be kosher, part not kosher. So they need to come in there to make sure that if there's kelim that need to be kashered, that the kelim are being kashered properly for our production. What are the protocols? How we exercising the protocols? How we making sure that they keep to what they're supposed to? So we initiated. And every kashrus organization will come to the factory. The first thing they'll do is meet the engineers of the factory just to see what the whole system looks like. Because many times there could be different examples of where there are different pipes that are leading to different places which are shared with other factories, and the steam is regenerated, sent back to the factory, and there could be really non-kosher steam or liquid or different things happening in the same place. So they first need to see the system. So you need to have a kashrus organization which understands the modern technology of the factory and understand products, what goes into a product. You know, I once went with one of the mashgichim, went to one of the factories here, and we were walking around the factory, and he says to me, they showed us 2 storage rooms, but there's a third one. And he asked them, where is it? And they said, they avoided it. And he was like, I'm telling you, there's a third one, because they're missing the chemical D34, whatever it was. And he asked them, where is that? They were like, oh, that's upstairs. And we went upstairs. Takes one look, and he looks and goes, that's on this is the section from Germany, right? They were like, it's a chazarot, we can return it. We're not. So again, the mashgiach or the kashrus organizations come into the factory, and they understand what's going on over here, and that's what we're relying on in a factory. So, but more or less, once they get it going, the process is running. They just have to check in whatever so often to make sure that it's running properly according to the kashrus that they would like it to be. So that's why looking at a product in a store, it may even look kosher, but you have no idea what else is being processed in that same factory and how the factory is built to know whether this product is really kosher or not, besides the ingredients that go into it. So now when we move on to a restaurant, come to a restaurant, so usually you have dairy or fleshig, and it's one of the two. So you're not going to have the problem of bus of a chalav in the factory, hopefully, in the restaurant, because it's one of the two. Unless the girl over there left her cup of coffee on the fleshig counter, it happens, but it shouldn't be happening. But so you have a restaurant. Now in a restaurant, what do I need supervision? I need 2 things: supervision on what's going on, the different processes that are happening there, and then I also need on the products that are coming in. So I need a mashgiach there who's making sure that all the products that come in every day are the products that are accepted by this hechsher, and that throughout the day, if they can run out of products, what's the protocol? Does it mean that that's it, they're done, or it means that there's a way they could get more products? But then there's a lot going on in a restaurant. You have, especially in a dairy restaurant. In a dairy restaurant, more than a fleshly restaurant, you have ingredients from all over. You have to really be a bucky and sharing from all over the world. In a fleshly restaurant, more or less, if it's not Chinese, you have the meat, chicken, spices, and some vegetables. But in a dairy restaurant, there's tons of salads. There's a lot of leafy vegetables which need to be cleaned, checked properly from bugs. You have flour. Many times they're baking flour. The flour has to be sifted. Commercial flour has to be sifted. Even if in your house you don't find bugs in your flour, but in commercial flour it's very common to find bugs. If they're making enough dough, so there's hafrashas challah. I remember once in one of the pizza shops, they had a system in the morning, the mashgiach was there every morning to make sure the challah was separated. And it was great. He went to learn in yeshiva, he learned in the mir, great guy. But we chab that throughout the day they're making 3-4 batches of dough. Who's in charge the rest of the day? There's no system, and they're working like crazy. Who's in charge of that? So there has to be some kind of system that we could tell, did they take off the challah from each dough they made or not? There's Trumas and Maestris, which we have to be more careful about here in this country, was to have certain mitzvahs over here, which certain products, certain aksher may be more questionable. There's There's bishul akum, if there's a guy working in the kitchen there, and many of these restaurants have a guy working, not just washing dishes, and even if he's supposed to be washing dishes, at busy times he's helping out with the cooking, and fires go out, and they're busy, and even if there's mashgiach there, sometimes he's busy doing his job that they gave him. So there needs to be a lot of supervision, especially in a dairy restaurant and also in a fleischig restaurant. And that's what we're relying. We're relying on the hechsher that they have a system there throughout the entire time that it's open, making sure that the products are the right products, and they're supervising and implementing the process, the things that have to be taken care of throughout the time. At night, who has the keys? Who has the keys to the place? It has to be closed. Is there meat being left out? It has to be sealed, etc. There's many different things. When we come to a hotel, so now a hotel is even more complicated, because in a hotel we do have dairy, we have fleischig, we have parav. There's so much going on. I was just in one of the hotels here last week, just seeing the kitchens. It's almost hard to believe that one mashgiach or even two could be on top of everything. It's just so much going on all at the same time. They're running out of room, and if one of the chefs run out of a spice or something, he's running to the other kitchen, and then they have the kitchen, the dining room, a ballroom, a restaurant. There's just a lot going on there. So there has to be a real system in place, making sure that everything's running, especially if the restaurant's a different level of hechsher than the hotel itself. There has to be a system how we know that it's not being mixed. So this is what we're relying on the kashrus organization, and this is what it means that when we talk about kashrus organization, there's some on a higher level, lower level, middle level. We're trying to figure out how much on top of the system are they, and how involved are they in the kashrus of the production of the product, or in the restaurant, the eatery, etc. So now we can get on to the second part. Here in Eretz Yisrael, what makes it so complicated to navigate the kashrus over here? We come to Eretz Yisrael, I hear this, I hear that. So let's start from the basics. More or less in America, you get a list. This section is good, this section is not good. I eat from this section, I don't eat from this section. And that's it. It's more or less a yes or no. Over here, there are many hechsherim where it depends. This time, yeah, this time not. So the Rashiv and I heard a few times from someone who works in the Rabbinut. His name is Tzvi Licker. He works in the Rabbinut, and he told us as follows. When he was learning, he's actually an American who learned in Eretz Yisrael and then came to learn in Yeshivas Merkas Harav. At the time, the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Merkas Harav was Rav Shapiro. Shapiro was the chief rabbi. And Rav Shapiro came one day to Yeshiva, and he said, I can't sleep at night. I can't sleep at night. I feel guilty that I'm responsible for the kashrus of the country, and what do? So he called together 10 of the Avreichim, and this person was one of them, and they had a meeting. And at the meeting, they were discussing who are we catering to, who are we trying to reach out to, and then we could decide how could we reach out to them. So his lashon was as follows. He says, not the left or the left of the leftists. We're reaching out to the Noar Yisrael. Noar Yisrael are the youth which will buy on Erev Pesach rolls, bread, to eat on Pesach. That's what we're reaching out to. Now, in order for us to reach out to them, we're going to have to get our stamp on as many products as possible and on as many eateries as possible, because the more we get out there as kosher, on some level of kosher, is the less that they'll be eating from other products which have no shaykhs to kashrus. So in order to do that, we need to come up with as many leniencies, as many heterim, as many kulas as possible to be able to do that. And in order to do that, we're going to have to even sometimes be seimach on kulis, which in Shulchan Aruch may say that b'di'evid we're not seimach on, but they felt we're in such a b'di'evid situation, we need to be seimach on it. So therefore, and that's what was called Rabbanut. The Rabbanut was based on this logic that we are going to try to do whatever we could to get as much as we can out there. So is it true that is it right to say that's straight? No, you can't say it's straight, but is it kosher? It's kosher. On what level? On a lot of their products are on a very superficial, a very low standard of kashrus, because that's who they are catering to. That's what Rabbanut's catering to. And he gave us different examples. Maybe a different time we could talk about the different examples. He told us about a restaurant in Tel Aviv that they were selling bas of a chav. And the way he said it wasn't like ki'ilu, it was bas of a chav, like midaraisa bas of a chalav. That's what they were selling. And they asked from the Rabbanut for rolls that would be kosher lePesach. So the Rabbanut had a meeting. Do we help them get kosher lePesach rolls? And maybe we'll save them from kares, even though they're eating bas of a chalav and people may think we're giving a hechsher to this place, or we just say, no, we have nothing to do with you. And they decide, you know what? If we can help them in some way, we're going to do it. So that's their goal. What happened was Rav Reuben from the Reuben Kashrus and Rav Kook, they were the Rabbanim of the city of Rehovot, and they felt like we're the Rabbanim of the city and we're backing such a low standard of kashrus. How could that be? We want that our factories, our eateries in our city should be on a higher level. But they ran into an issue because even if we'll upgrade our standard, there's what's called the kashrut, which is that, at least until now, that they have the kashrut, which is that it has to be kosher, but everyone has to accept the other city's kashrus. So if we go ahead and we tell our people they need to hold by a certain level, they'll say, okay, so we're just going to use the Rabbanut from Akko, from Nariya, where who knows what level that is. So they were mechadesh, there's something called Rabbanut Mahadrin. Then in every city, the Rabbanim of the city could establish a higher level of kashrus, which is called Rabbanut Mahadrin, and give the choice to the people of the city. Do you want the regular Rabbanut, or you want a higher level Rabbanut Mahadrin? Now, who's making the protocols of the Rabbanut Mahadrin? The Rabbanim of that city. So now this is where it gets confusing, because in every city you need to find out who are the Rabbanim, what are the protocols that they're making, which is going to be dependent probably on the demand of the people in the city or who they're catering to. So, and are they supervising it, and how are they executing their policies? So now we have to check into each city. So it gets like confusing. Rabbanut regular, okay, that not. Rabbanut Mahadrin depends on the city. So when we go to Tzfas, there's something called over there now just started Bidat Tzfas, but the Rabbanut Mahadrin Tzfas was better. In Netanya you have a better level of Rabbanut Mahadrin. You have different cities, Rehovot. So now I have to try to figure out each city in that city. And then sometimes in some cities, even the Rabbanut Mahadrin, you can find out that some of the Rabbanut Mahadrin restaurants or eateries are better than others because they're using a higher standard products. So within the Rabbanut Mahadrin. When you come to Yerushalayim, it's even more confusing because they decided to like stick in middle there, Mehuderet, which is somewhere between regular Rabbanut and Rabbanut Mahadrin. And then they're redoing their system, so they created something called Mahadrin Min Mahadrin, which is really Mahadrin, just as they went through it. So it's really confusing. It's confusing. That's what's confusing about the whole thing. So, and besides that, in Yerushalayim, so many of us are used to hearing from our parents and our relatives, what do you mean when I learned in Eretz Yisrael we used to eat over here and eat over there, and that place was the best place, and that was a good place. And it's true. Probably 10, 15 years ago, that was the in place and was a good place, because 10, 15 years ago, maybe already 15 years ago, Rabbi Mahadran was accepted by many B'nai Torah. It was run by Rabbanim. There were Shemakulits. There were Chash Rabbanim who were in charge of it. But later on, the government took it over and was being run by governmental people, which they maybe could read Hebrew, but it wasn't run by Rabbanim anymore. And in recent years, Rabbanim came. It's not a secret. You can look. It's documented in the news. Rabbanim tried getting back the kashrus, and they had a struggle. So now already it depends on each place in Yerushalayim. This Rabbi Mahadran place may be better. This one less better. So this is where it gets confusing, and therefore, when it comes to talking about kashrus and Eretz Yisrael, but we do have good hechsherim. We have top level hechsherim also over here. We have, just to mention some of them, we have the Eid HaCharedis, we have Reuben, Landau, Sheris, Fratian, fruits and vegetables. There's Tunuv Mahadran. There's different hechsherim which you could find good level hechsherim. And but when we start going down to the lower levels, that's where it gets more complicated. So we started off that there's three misconceptions. One is politics. There is politics, like the Rashiva spoke about that. There's very little transparency between one kashrus to the other, which creates certain politics between them. But at the same time, that's not the answer, as we explained. Dairy needs just as much, if not more, supervision than fleshik, and that which people think that dairy is more acceptable than fleshik could be coming from, there was a point in time where the dairy restaurants were still under the Rabbanim and fleshik was not, so there was a tkufa where that was true. And then we have the third misconception is that the weakest hechsher in Eretz Yisrael is better than the strongest hechsher in America. I think we definitely could say that there are hechsherim in America better than what we described for what the Rabbinot's catering to. They're doing a great job for what they're catering to. That is the awareness that I have. Any questions? Oh, there's also a few other misconceptions. You can walk into a store and they'll say, Kol HaBadatzim. What does that mean, Kol HaBadatzim? Which was my first, when I came to that restaurant then, the mashgiach told me, Kol HaBadatzim. I was like, what's Kol HaBadatzim? Now, Badat stands for Bezdin Tzedek. Bezdin Tzedek is me, you, and you. Us three could be a Bezdin Tzedek. So it's any Bezdin Tzedek. Like, they're trying to trick you and make you think it's Badat Eid HaCharedis. More than that, sometimes you go to a restaurant or a place and they'll tell you, Anachnu, Reuben and Eid HaCharedis. Now, at least until Mashiach comes, you're not finding a restaurant with those two hechsherim. Reuben's good and Eid HaCharedis is good, but together in the same place, I don't know. You'll let me know if you find one. So you ask the guy, what do you mean? And he's like, Reuben Eda? And then, where's the paper? He has no paper. What he means is his meat, he tries that his meat should be Reuben and Eda Charedis, but the other products, who knows what they are, and when he can't get the Reuben products, who's forcing him to get Reuben and to cross it off the menu that day? Who's on top of him? He's not Meshubit. So these are just some things that you'll go to. You'll see Kol B'datzim, Anachnu Reuben ve'Eda Charedis. They're talking about the meat. That's basically. Yeah.
Question.
Go.
If a person walks into a restaurant, let's say making a Rabbi Mahadran, and you speak to the mashgiach there, he tells you, all the meats here are badats. They're all all Reuben. All the vegetables are frati. And what level are you able to trust him? And if he tells you that, is that a good enough a reason for a person to eat in that restaurant?
Okay, so my suggestion is ask him that question 3 times. Ask him what are the hechsherim of the ingredients 3 times. And you'll see each time he's going to tell you more and more about the hechsherim they're using. And then ask him if you could go in the back of into the storage room and see if it matches with what he said. If it does, then you're fine. But ask him also who's in charge of the guy that's working there. If there's a guy there when he's not there, because he's only there a few hours a day. So ask him who's in charge of the guy, right? And then find out those two things. If that satisfies you, then great.
If I could just for a
Yeah.
second, Rabbi Weiner, one time we had a Talmud whose in-laws came and they were going to a specific restaurant and it was a question of Shalom Bayis. So I went with Talmud on Rabbi Weiner's suggestion and I spoke to the Mashkiach. I said, "What hechsher is your meat?" So he said, "We use this meat, this hechsher, and that hechsher. The lamb is a specific hechsher which we thought was acceptable." I said, "Okay, can I see it? Can you show it to me?" And it took him a long time till he finally brought me the lamb. It wasn't the hechsher that he said it was. And I was one time in a hotel, and I asked them what vegetables, at least that we could eat the vegetables. The vegetables are frati. And I called Rabbi Frati, who's my neighbor. And Rabbi Frati said, "I could promise you, my vegetables have never been in that hotel, because it was a very far away hotel." He said, "There's no way that they have my vegetables." And there were times that Rabbi Weiner was also at a meeting where there was a person who was telling people that they know. People know what you want them to say. They know what. So you have to make sure that this person is someone that you really feel you can trust, or ask them to see. And even that, I was in a specific restaurant where the owner of the restaurant said, "I know in other restaurants they keep packages from like from the higher levels. They just keep packages because anyone comes, this is here. This is just to show it off. But they're not really keeping that because they don't have a good hechsher." So it's very tricky.
But
Yeah.
I want to say this because in a
it's okay.
certain
No,
sense,
perfect.
I want to say you're contradicting what Rabbi Weiner said, but when the question was asked to Rabbi Weiner, he said, ask 3 times, and then he asked to go and back and see if it matches.
Right.
And he said, if you do that, it checks out.
So I don't think I'm
So
contradicting. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that that's clear, that
Right.
if you do that and it checks out,
Right.
as
So
opposed to you're still not sure,
Right.
maybe he showed you a package that was
Right.
that he just keeps there for show.
right.
I
So
mean, at some point you have to.
100%. I'll tell you what I think. I'm sorry. If
Yeah,
that's
you go.
okay. When I was at the hotel with my wife, and I have a little bit of experience in this, the mashkiach I was not comfortable with the way that he was talking to me.
So it's
I
a
know-
personal thing that you felt.
Yeah, if you feel that you can trust this mashkiach, you feel that he's a person that you feel is being honest, and you feel that he's someone that is knowledgeable, and then there is a concept of erech and bisur, and you can trust them. But sometimes it's just not like that. And the mashkiach, I saw him, I didn't like the way he wasn't looking me in the eye. He was like, "It's Rebbe Frati," and he was struggling with even getting the name out. It's like I'm like, this doesn't sound good. It doesn't look good. And
Because we've had both situations. We've had that where at hotels in particular, where the hotel, the manager would tell you one thing and then you found out that it wasn't true.
right.
And then we also had hotels where the shkiach was very upfront, very
Right.
straight. He said, "I'm going to tell you, this is okay, this is not okay. If you want, you can come pick out the package that you want. We'll show it to you."
Right.
And we felt, okay
Right.
about it.
I think you're saying a very good point. That I tell over horror stories. It's not all horror stories. It's not always that. So you're right about that. That's what Rabbi was saying. But at the same time, a person has to be aware. And Rabbi was saying, ask them to see the package. And if someone just tells you that's what they use, could be that's what they usually use. A lot of times, this is what I believe Rabbi was saying before. A lot of times, this is their standard.
That's right.
But sometimes, if there's and Rabbi Weiner knows better than me that a lot of products aren't always available. Like they want to bring you a certain standard, but it's just not available. So the supplier will send them something else with a different hechsher without them asking. And they say, "What do you mean? Well, don't we always have this meat? Sorry, we can't provide you. So here's the next level."
So how does this work with Eidach and Lemrisur?
Because I'll explain you very clearly.
Facial profiling, like what's
Explain very clearly. Eidach and Misurim, I trust the guy 100%, but only can feed what he knows. So if he doesn't know how to wash lettuce, he's taking the whole head of lettuce and sticking it in a sink, and that's how he washes it, I trust him that he washes it. But that's not going to help me. So I can only trust him according to the ideas he has. And if he doesn't have control in what he's doing, I also trust him that he doesn't have control. So Eidach Hanem Sum is not going to get me too far here.
So what's the practical way? Meaning I'm going away, my in-laws are taking me away to a hotel, and I don't know where, and I can't get a hold of the Rav.
Call Rabbi
I can't
Farkash.
get a hold of it. So what's the practical way to go about it? Like,
If you, again, buy a grill, grill your fish. And it's all the better, but otherwise, no, but otherwise I'm saying you could try speaking to Mashgiach. Again, I don't think every Mashgiach is bad. But when the Mashgiach says we use these hechsherim, means we try to use hechsherim, like the Rosh said, we try to. And I heard this clearly from one of the owners of the hotel when we once went to meet him, I went to Rav Center, and he said to us, he says, I cannot commit to what you want because there are days that they don't have the rib steak, they don't have what I need. I'll get it whenever I could, but there are days I can't. And I'm not crossing it off the menu. That's what he said. So he tells you we use that. I believe him that he uses that, but what do you use when you can't get that? I had the shuk call me once from the shuk, and they said, what are you driving them nuts for that they should only get Reuben? We don't have enough packages of that. We have to give them from other Hechsherim also. So they told me. So it could be now there's more on the market, but it's, yeah.
So why is it so hard for American hashgachas to wrap their mind around? What's different? The American hashgachas also deal with a lot of swarmy fellows. And everyone's lying to them left, right, and center. Non-Jewish people are running all sorts of scams. Kosher from Yidden, Moshefer, and
Right.
Bashir. Chickens.
So I don't want to say, I'm not saying Lashon Hara or anything, but when you're dealing with Lamdanim, we'll call it, or those that know it, right, it's sometimes harder.
People that are doing hashgacha in America.
That's what you're saying. Because there's very little transparency here. They won't talk. They won't talk. They won't sit around the table as much to discuss it. And they're scared. They're scared of it's a whole different system. It's.
I would assume that the central Rabbanut has control over all of them.
They don't.
And isn't that the whole goal? The chief
Yeah.
rabbi
Yeah, but they don't. I know they don't.
What?
I know they don't. They may try to, but they don't. There's one very big hechsher that they're actually they can't stand because they have no control over them. Not the Eidos, other form. Yeah.
What would be would there be a parallel hechsher over here to say something in America? What would be the parallel? In other words, is the badatz like what is it parallel to?
We could talk about that at a different time.
It's just very different. It's almost like two different things.
Different. In other words, when people try to compare it, people try to wrap
Yeah,
their
it's
head
a very
around it,
hard
it's
question
just
to
like
answer.
doing-
Very hard to answer. Very hard to answer.
There are hashgachas in America exactly like that. No transparency. The guys barely know what they're doing. I mean, the chassid don't do it. That's I'm sure they think they know what they're doing. But there are hashgachas that have Yiddish ICSM the same way over here, and they.
By the way,
try
this is
to-
Chaim Ribiat, who works for the COR of Canada.
Some kashrut.
Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't say.
No, you can say it. By all means. No, I'm saying, but there are in America that have the same ideology as what the Badatz is trying to do.
Right. But we're talking about the big hechsher. I think the
question is like, what do you have comparable to a regular standard hashgacha in America, which is widely accepted across the whole album?
So over here we have the Eidach Reis, we have Reuben, we have Landau, we have some.
Has there been significant change in the past few years?
So I want to mention, Zevi asked a very good question. Has there been a change? I believe, in spirit, for sure. Just now, Yontif, besides the few hotels that are really changing their products for Yontif, but even I just heard the King David and the Orient is going up from regular Rabbanut to Rabbanut Mahajin. Did you hear that, Moshe?
Products or the actual
Rabbi Lishner told me that they're changing the products to Rav Noah Mahadran. Yeah.
Well, they
But
wanted to hire my uncle. They wanted to hire my uncle, and they couldn't.
oh, so but the right. So but you see, what that brought out to me was something I think very important. That you see that the crowd, the crowd that's coming to Eretz Yisrael, is creating a demand for something better. So if even those hotels are feeling that they need to upgrade whatever level they're upgrading to, whether it's a good level for you or not, but the fact that they're willing to do it for Yontiv means they're feeling the pressure, which means that we are creating something here. We're doing something. Yes.
If we're creating an awareness, I'm sure a lot of people are going to watch this video, then what does the Rav have to say about Bachrim that come to yeshiva, girls that come to seminary, Avrechim that are learning in Eretz Yisrael, and they have relatives, parents, in-laws, aunts and uncles that are taking them to restaurants or hotels, and there's this built-in pressure that I can't tell them, no, what do I eat when I go there? How do we create an awareness to try to eliminate some of that pressure and maybe address it on, let's create an awareness how, there's somebody that goes somewhere and they're very comfortable with saying, I'm on a diet and I can't eat this, or I'm allergic, so why when it comes to Hechsherim, is it like we're not allowed to talk about it?
Okay, so Byron, you asked a bomb question. It's really a very, very good question. It's a wonderful question. And I should have mentioned it before, that many, many Bachrim, girls, Avrechim, who are coming here and are here, who want to keep to a very high standard of kashrus, are under a lot of pressure from parents, grandparents who are coming to visit, and relatives that's very difficult to say no to. And they have a personal shaila. They really have a personal shaila that they need to ask. I once went with a bacha to Adam Gadol, where his parents were telling him that if he doesn't eat by his relatives who eat regular Rabbanut in one of these out-of-town cities, they're pulling him back. And we went to ask the shaila what he should do. And the Adam Gadol thought for a few minutes. He was thinking about it, and he said, you know what? For him, another year of learning was very important. He came from a modern family, he learned in a very modern yeshiva, and he felt that for him, another year of learning will change his life, and for him, we have to be matim to eat the rabbinah by those relatives. L'maisa, again, this story turned out good because he married a very chashuva wife, and they're sitting and learning already for many years, at least 7 years in Kailal, and he's really steigen. So, again, it's true. To create awareness to these people, it's hard to. I mean, hopefully this will get out there to them, but it's hard. It's hard. But a person has a shayla. How much friction should I make? Now, if we're talking about treif, you're 100% correct. Treif, you're on a diet, and there's no eating. But if we're talking about a question, we try to at least get to Rabbi Mahadrin or something like that, which is a higher standard of kashrus than nothing, and then we have to down up. Is it going to cause friction? Do you have to go? Do you have to bring friends? Maybe you have to go, but your friends don't have to go along with you. But each one's a shaila by itself, and it's not an answer that goes on the chat for all your friends, which is what happens, right? We're speaking to one person personally, then all of a sudden, everyone's like, there's a heter.
What kind of awareness are we creating tonight, if that's a personal...
So I think, so the awareness that we're creating tonight is that everyone should be aware that there are different standards of kashrus here in Eretz Yisrael. It's not just politics, it's real, and a person has to make a decision for himself. What level I want to be on? Do I want to keep the standard that I'm used to eating in America over here, and then I can help you out with that? Or I want to go down one notch, I can help you out with that. Or I want to go down 2 notches, and I can help you out with that also. That's what we're trying to...
Is there an assumption in America people actually look at that?
Did I answer? Yeah, okay.
Is there an assumption here that in America we look at our chair? I mean, growing up young still, I think because we're so comfortable, we don't really look at our chair.
We're in America?
You walk into a gourmet glada, pomegranate.
Oh, okay, when you have such a store.
But in general, America is so advanced that maybe issues that we're so comfortable. And that why would we ask?
That's a great point.
We're not.
So that's why we're creating this awareness. You're right. There's many people that come there, so automatically it's like one big gourmet glot. That's the way they view it. And they view it as it's all just Hebrew letters. And you can have Hebrew letters that say on it.
Don't really ask
I'm in
about
duty free. There was a bottle of wine said low kosher.
I'll just end off with, there's a common question, like, I go places and I see very ultra Haredi people there with Shreimlach and kapatas and all different dress. And how's it possible? How's it possible? So I had recently 2 stories. And I'm just going to say them short, but one story is that there was a group checking into one of the hotels, a group of 25, a little more than 25 people checking in, and one of the people there decided, you know what, let me just double check this. He called one of the Kashrus organizations in America, and he asked the person in charge, who's a good friend of mine, is it all right? So he said, look, as far as I know, we don't recommend it. He even said, if I get $1 for every person who calls me about this place, I'd be a millionaire. But we don't recommend it. So he said, so the person then asked someone else who was checking in with him, and they said that Rabbi Weiner okayed it. So he called back this Kashrus organization and told them that he heard that Rabbi Weiner okayed it. Weiner said it's okay to rely on the Hechsher. So this person, this Kashrus organization, called me and said, is it true? I said, not true. He says, you spoke to a Rav yesterday and you told him it's okay to rely on it. I said, I didn't speak to any Rav. I spoke to a lot of Bachrim, a lot of seminary girls, and I did not speak to any Rav yesterday. So he says, but I'm telling you, they said you spoke to a Rav. So I said, okay, send me his contact information, I'll contact him. He sent me the information, I saw it, and I chapped. He didn't speak to me. He had someone else call me who said to me, can we rely on the Hechsher for Shemitah? And I said to him, I don't recommend you eating it. He said, no. The Rav doesn't want to know about eating. He just wants to know Shemitah. I said, okay. I said, Shemitah is probably fine, but I don't recommend eating it. He says, no, the Rav doesn't want to know that. So I wrote an email to the Rav. And I said to him, I just want to make it very clear. I do not recommend eating there. I got back a response. He says, he writes me back, I checked out the Trumas and Maestris, and what other potential issue could there be? Maybe you can inform me. And then he writes, says, unfortunately, surprisingly, in the town that he lives in, Shem are so weak, he says, it's probably better than what we have here anyways. So a person who doesn't know what potential problems there could be, bugs, hafrashas challah, he only knows about Trumas and Maestris, which is the least of all problems, so that's what they're relying on. Story number 2 is, so then there was another Rav there who was also saying over that it's fine to join, to check in, and quoting Rav Efrati on this, which I knew was a little strange because we spoke to Rav Efrati not too much before that. Didn't say exactly what he said. So we contacted that Rav and asked him, are you okaying it? He said, yeah. On what basis? I met the mashgiach, he's a nice guy. Okay. He's a nice guy. Okay, and he's a nice guy. He's a nice guy. Okay. You spoke to Rav Frati? No, I didn't hear from him. So, where are you saying it from? I heard it. Anyway, so that's the answer. The answer is that I'm not saying everyone, but there's a large group that just follows the crowd. So this is another answer to the awareness we're creating tonight, is that at least think for yourself. If your decision at the end is that you want to go and follow the crowd, fine. That's your decision. But at least make that decision. Know what you're doing. And then then that's and anyone who wants any more information about places, eateries, products, could speak to Rabbi Farkish at ZNT Kosher, 058-567-4375, and or email zntkosher@gmail.com. Shkayach Rabbi Sente, shkayach to everyone for joining.